Straightforward. Any discussion? So put that motion, and all those in favour please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. Item 13.
Just in apologising to Councillor Belford, could I just mention that my slip had to do with the fact that I did deal with Councillor Belshaw in an earlier life, and so my mind was slipping by 20 years.
It's Christmas time. Councillor Dick. Okay. Reformatting of financial reporting for Council. Mr. Collins here. Are you talking to this, or?
But I will get some.
Oh, if need, is he here in reserve if needed?
No, you should sit up here to comment on some of the issues. Thanks, Manton. What we have here is a proposal for reformatting the financial reporting to Council. You'll recall that when the first report relating to the first 4 months was provided to Council, there were suggestions of improvement in that, in the information given in the formatting, and Manton and I have risen to that, and we've put down there the objectives of the improved reporting. We've got, and I hope we've picked you up right on this, more focus on management comment on variances from budget and the operating statement. Fewer figures provided and more narrative, so there's more explanations of the variances. Management comments more closely aligned to the financial statements being commented on. Before we had all the comments up front and then you had to find the statements at the back. Now we have the statements with the financial comments aligned to those. Improved pro rata projections. We had a discussion on that, and I asked whether the current financial year could continue with the divide by 12, even though we've discussed the limitations of that, and the 14-15 would be done on a proper pro rata basis, so the variances for the 14-15 year will be a lot more meaningful. But for now, for the remaining 3 or 4 financial reports for this current financial year, they will still be divided by 12. We've also put in there information on cash flows. One of the councillors, I think it was Councillor Hewitt, picked up that there was an absence of cash flow information. We've brought that back in again. It used to be with the council report. We've brought it in a slightly new style, and we've prorated that, and we'll come up with explanations on variances. So without going to too much ado, what Manton and I have done is come up with a restyled 4-month progress report. So as when, if Council adopts this as a sort of a blueprint going forward, then when we do the next report, which will be the end of February, and we'll be deep in annual plan and what have you, we'll at least have a format to go to, which is in our interest to be able to do it as quickly as possible. So that's the purpose of the attachment 1. It's divided into 4 sections: the operating account with variances explained, and the managers will be asked to explain the variances. There's a slightly, this is page 45, there's a restyled operating statement. It's about half the size of the other, and we believe that picks up on the main areas that Council should be aware of. For variance reporting, you'll notice there that instead of a divide by 12, we've got in the green area there, we've got an actual pro rata, and we've got unfavourable and favourable variances stated there. So reading across the strategic planning, you've got an actual of 956, you've got a pro rata of 875, you've got an unfavourable of 80, and the managers would comment on that. So if you go overleaf to page 46, by way of examples there, we have a note reference, so it can take you back to the table. The strategic planning is the activity. The variation in that case was 80,000 unfavourable, and I've got the manager of strategic planning would complete this explanation, and Mr. Collins will get that sheet around the managers and get them to fill it in and send it back. So I think we'll get good, sharp comments about their business. I've left Heat Smart progress report in there, and I've left the non-recoverable appeals. I'm open to those being in or out, but I just didn't want to take everything out. I think the non-recoverable cost reappeals and referrals could possibly be something that doesn't need to come to every council meeting. It's just one item on a budget. 1 year it blew out considerably, so hence that report started. The next sheet on page 49 is special scheme reserves. this is a bit of a challenge, really, to explain why scheme reserves closing balances differ from the year-end planned closing balance. I've had an attempt there of some of the explanations, and we'll improve on those as we go through. I think those explanations will enable councillors to understand the way we do schemes and the way they track through during the years. But that's a start on it. The next three sheets, which are pages 51, 52, 53, 54, the next four sheet, that's individual project analysis. I've left them in, although there are a lot of detail, and I'll be guided by you whether you want to continue seeing them, but this is an opportunity for any councillor that's interested in a specific project to see the performance of that project. Yes, councillor?
I can't read it. It's just too small even for me.
Oh, yes, it is a little bit small, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe a bigger
We could pump
bigger
it up
page.
a bit. Yeah. Mr. Collins, do you think you could pump that up a bit, or is that... You'd have to put it on A3. But I'm guided by you councillors whether you want to see that. I mean, Mr. Collins and I will produce the information you need to understand council expenditures. So it's in there for the moment. You can be thought about.
Chairman, HBRC in their accounting use quite a clever little device for exception reporting, really, and that's the traffic light. Those symbols. So green, little green dot or square bit, everything's fine. Going through to amber, be careful. Red, danger. And it certainly helps the readability of things.
Could I just respond to that? I'm currently engaged with a set of things which have got traffic lights. We've gone from red to amber red, to green to amber green. All the variations to get to it. There's all sorts of arguments on it. And I found at the end it's just disintegrated to being almost unusable. Seems like a great idea. Thought it was a great idea, but
Considering where this discussion started, and Councillor Graham came in with a commercial set of glasses on that day, have you got any questions on this, or have you got any views on?
Firstly, I'd like just to congratulate you about doing this so quickly. Really, I think it's from my perspective, it's a lot better, and so it's really good. So I would move that we accept the change. I do have some questions just on the numbers. I don't know if it's appropriate time now or later to talk on those. I'll move that first.
The actual numbers?
Yeah, I'll just some queries.
Now that you see it in a different format?
No.
I'd second.
You're happy to second that? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, was there any other questions, though, before I accept the seconder? All good. So, you wish to speak further, Councillor?
No, I'm fine. I think I'm very pleased about the change.
Councillor Hewitt? Happy? Any other speakers? I'll just add before we put the motion. My congratulations on the quick turnaround. Manton, I suspect you were burning a bit of midnight oil doing this stuff, but I think a different perspective, new councillors, different perspective. I think it's healthy, so it's good. Put that motion then. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. Okay, 15 monthly work plan.
Just on the accounts.
We're short a chief executive.
Are we able to have just a few questions on the accounts?
Mr. Chairman, I'm quite happy to take them after the meeting, or do you want them now?
All these numbers aren't made up, though, are they?
No, they're not, councillor. They are the 4 months.
Right, monthly work plan. Madam Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is really just going through the work that's ahead of us in the next, well, certainly early part of 2014, not necessarily just January, but it really sort of is an opportunity. This is a standard paper, and it's an opportunity to provide you with all with an understanding of what the different groups in council are doing, and also obviously if there's anything that's particularly within your constituency, your area of interest, or you've had a question about it, it may be able to answer that. So it's fairly self-explanatory. It is what it is, and I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor Duff.
On page 79, the last item on the page, the coastal,
Yes.
refers to as draft strategy being developed, brought to the council
Yes.
in June. This is a pretty contentious set of issues in the past. What kind of public consultation or involvement would be contemplated in developing this strategy?
I actually don't know what Mr. Adie's actually even been thinking about for.
Just email Mr. Adie to come down. So.
Okay, all right. So can we just park that question from
Okay,
me?
and
Thank you.
my second one is on the next page, the reference to review of communications plan under external relations in the middle of the page. My recollection is that we got an email from Drew Broadley at some point mentioning that there was an annual review of the communications plan every February, and so in what form or at what point would this issue come to us?
Good question. Look, firstly, perhaps some clarification. The formatting has misaligned those, so the communications plan actually relates specifically to the Heat Smart program. So we have a communications, an overall communications strategy, but then the comms team work with the relevant staff in particular work areas and develop communications plans where appropriate. So obviously Heat Smart being certainly one of our more external facing projects, we have a communications plan around that based around the various phase out dates and things like good wood education and stuff like that. So that specifically relates to Heat Smart. But coming back to your broader question, I guess, about communication strategy, that will come through that always comes through the Corporate and Strategic Committee. So you'd have an opportunity then to discuss and debate the content of that.
So there's a review at the beginning of the year?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I'd have to actually specifically check about whether or not it's still going to be in March, but it'll certainly be, yeah.
So we get an opportunity to look at
yes.
that?
Yeah.
That's right. Okay. Other questions? Councillor Barker.
On the same page, there's the PDF forgot. There's the continued engagement of the Office of Treaty Settlements on the redraft of the Regional Planning Committee bill. Could the Chief Executive tell me how many iterations we've been on this now? I'd also like the Chief Executive to enlighten us when we're likely to get to the end of this. And thirdly, I'd like the Chief Executive to tell us where this has got to and what sort of obligations this is going to place on the Regional Council, on councillors, because it's going to be legislated for, and when the views of the Regional Council itself are going to be, councillors are going to be engaged on this.
Sure. Iterations are probably up to about version 12 or 13 of the bill, but that's from the very start of the process when the Parliamentary Council initially, produced a draft. A lot of the issues that have been raised then have come around, I guess, almost a philosophical difference about how prescriptive a bill is versus, or in this case, finally an act, versus how much can be left to the terms of reference that's subsequently developed by all the parties to the committee to go. And so there's been different points of view around how much should actually be specified in the Act and how much should just say, well, the terms of reference should deal with this. So there's been some backwards and forwards on that. One of the other things that I guess has caused a number of iterations is some concern from the Crown's perspective, because this is the first of its type in New Zealand in terms of permanently establishing this type of committee between a council and, in this case, a treaty claimant groups. They're very conscious of precedent and how that may flow through to other legislation. So there's been quite a few iterations that have sort of been based on the concerns that have been expressed by various lawyers within government departments around precedent. In terms of the obligations to council, the obligation is that there is always a committee to undertake the Resource Management Act plan development, policy development functions of the regional council. Whether or not the regional council exists, it has specific functions specified in the Resource Management Act, and the obligation of the committee is to undertake those functions. The other, I guess, big commitment from the council is that there is equal representation of elected representatives and the specified treaty claimant groups, so there's an obligation on the councillors to be part of that committee. Those are the key things. The actual process, though, this committee will only ever recommend to the council. It must be the council itself that adopts a proposed plan change for public notification, because that in itself is set out in the Resource Management Act, and that was one of those perhaps unintended consequences that Parliamentary Council wanted to avoid. So those are probably the key things.
Supplementary question. When it comes to the philosophical difference between being prescriptive and relying on interpretation, where on the line has the council staff been in these negotiations? Favouring prescription or favouring flexibility?
Look, it very much depends, councillor, on what you're talking about. So, for example, if you're talking about the quorum for a meeting, we don't actually want to go back through a select committee of Parliament to change the quorum. So, very much the mechanics of how the committee runs should be left to the terms of reference, and review provisions put in that for them to do that. More fundamental things, such as the purpose of the Act, the purpose of the committee, I beg your pardon, the makeup of that committee, I think have definitely got to be spelled out in the legislation itself. So it's more around the fundamental principles, and some of the obligations should be in the legislation, but the mechanics of it, I believe, we have discussed this before, but we believe that that should be left to the full committee, and that includes the Māori members as well, to work on that and to fine tune it in a pragmatic sense if we find that things could be operated better.
And your answer is?
So my answer is it depends on what you want on the content that's under discussion as to how prescriptive you should be.
Could I just summarise how I interpret your answer? Your answer is that on the points of principle, the clarity about the purpose of the committee, you're inclined to be specific, but in terms of how the committee operates, general management of it, you're inclined to be more general and allow the committee to make its own decisions rather than be prescriptive. Okay, thank you.
Right, if we go back now to page 79, the COMAR report. Welcome, Mr. Adey. The question was, and I'll get